Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, May 13th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
And Christine's colleague at the American Enterprise Institute, its director of domestic and policy studies, and our Washington commentary columnist, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Matt, you have a piece coming out in the June commentary, which will be available maybe tomorrow online, maybe tonight. I'm not quite sure. Basically about how Biden is lousy at politics. And this was brought home this morning by the staggering results of the latest New York Times Siena poll, which suggests that not only is Biden in absolutely terrible shape, and it's interesting because they haven't done a poll, New York Times Siena, which is pretty much the gold standard of polling in America in terms of the accuracy of its results. They haven't done one in this format since November. And Biden has improved in no way, shape, or form since November, and it is now May. And has, in fact, in some areas gotten worse. And what it suggests right now is if the election were held today, Donald Trump would win 312 electoral votes, and Joe Biden would win 226 electoral votes, an almost complete reversal of the results of 2020. And that, in fact, only if you apply a likely voter screen, which is to say the people you think are going to vote as opposed to the registered voter population, can you get Biden anywhere close to not being blown out? And the problem with the likely voter screen now is that it kind of has an ideological quality to it that it didn't used to have. It used to really be about how people who voted before were more likely to vote again, and people who remembered whom they voted for the last time without being prompted there were various questions that created a voter in the pollster's mind that was likely or sure to vote. And since 2016, those categories are unreliable because Trump turned out this population of people in 2016 who had never voted before, but who weren't 18 or 19 or 20 years old. And so not only didn't they show up in the polling, no one even looked to ask people like them to be in polls, and everything got hinky. So the poll is bad, and it's bad. What it suggests it's bad about is that the American people don't like Biden on issues. I thought that mostly Biden's problem was age, but that's not really what this poll says, I have to say. And then we got to talk about what it says about Israel, Palestine, Gaza, which we'll get to in a minute, because maybe we should talk about something else just to make sure that we're not the ancient mariner going back over and over and over again over the same territory every day.
You said Biden's problem is his age. But now he has these other problems of the issues. I think it's fair to say Biden just has a lot of problems,
right,
and many of them are manifest in the poll. A third problem, in addition to age and the issues, is the Trump nostalgia, which we're seeing in the polls, that voters continually say that they preferred the economy, the state of the world, state of the country when Trump was president, and really disfavor current conditions in the country and in the world under Biden. And that, of course, is hurting Biden as well.
Very striking fact about that, of course, is that I think the presumption among Biden people and anti-Trump people generally, and even people like us, is that, look, his last year in office was a catastrophe, right? It was absolutely catastrophic. But that was because of a pandemic. And there was the sense that he was an inconstant hand during the pandemic. Then he rejected the results of the election. Then there was January 6th.
Well, remember, even amidst the chaos of 2020, that can look differently depending on where you stand.
That's my point, right?
For instance, the lockdowns were horrible. The school delays were horrible. Whether people blame Trump for those things, hard to say because he was all over the place. What people did experience, though, was a flood of federal spending that actually led to higher savings and higher incomes during the 2020 year. So that's the economy. Doesn't the overall Trump economy still looks preferable to what we had now? And of course, it was inflation free. The prices were stable under Trump. And the social disorder, the George Floyd chaos, that of course, as early as the 2020 election, was seen to have benefited Trump because Trump, despite the chaos and kind of the pigpen style quality of dust and uh, random objects flying around him wherever he goes, is still viewed by people as an authority, a pro-authority figure, pro-law and order figure. I just want to make a few comments about the poll. It's really interesting. The first thing is that it's not really much of a surprise. It's consistent. That's one thing that really strikes me about this election. Beginning in September, Trump took the lead. He really hasn't relinquished it. There was a moment after the State of the Union where Biden seems to have kind of moved up in the polls a couple points, but that so far is gone. The Biden bump is no more. But the second thing I'd point out about the polling, there are really two state level elections going on right now. If you think about the population of swing states, there are states in the Sun Belt, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and then there are the three states in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Trump's leads in the Sun Belt are pretty solid. I mean, he's up 50 to 38 in Nevada in this poll. He's up 49 to 39 in Georgia in this poll. And he's up 49 to 42 in this poll in Arizona, which means he's regained not only states he lost, but he's really well ahead in Nevada, which is a state that Republicans haven't won in 20 years. However, the Rust Belt election is much closer. So in Pennsylvania, he's up by 3. That's within the margin of error, 47 to 44. In Wisconsin, Biden's ahead by 2. And in Michigan, Trump has a little bit of a bigger lead, 49-42. He only needs Pennsylvania to win if he gets Georgia and Nevada. But I think that discrepancy between the two belts, as it were, is important. Two more points that are related. What this poll shows and what all of these polls have been showing is that Trump, if he's elected in November, it will be because the Republican Party has created a new majority, and that the educational polarization we've seen among white voters over the past decade, that is, college voters who identify as white, have been moving toward the Democratic Party, and non-college educated white voters have been going to the Trump Party, Republican Party in droves. That's now extending to minority voters. And so Trump's lead is really on the basis of Hispanic voters, which explains the Sun Belt victory, African American voters, and young voters. The issue there, though, is that those are the same voting groups that are somewhat unreliable when it comes to showing up on election day. And so I think that explains why we have this difference between, are we asking about registered voters, which would include the Hispanic voters, African American voters, right, young people, and likely voters who are more likely to be college educated white voters. I think that's the real question mark I've always appended to analyses of the election is, if the new majority for Trump shows up, then the election is over. Biden's only real chance is that a lot of these voters who are saying they prefer Trump to pollsters just don't make it to the polls on election day.
Well, and he is clearly, someone at the White House is finally looking at their own internal polling when it comes to minority voters, because we were chatting on our text chain before we were recording. And if you look at Biden, I always check the president's schedule at the beginning of every week to kind of get a sense of what they're thinking. And his schedule this week is all African-American voter turnout stuff. I mean, he's meeting with the plaintiffs from Brown versus Board of Education. He's going to deliver remarks at the Museum of African-American History. He's going to Atlanta for a fundraiser. He's giving commencement at Morehouse. He's going to Detroit. He's talking to the NAACP. So they are clearly worried, and they should be, because the other interesting thing about the New York Times poll showed that if you throw that third party candidate in, Biden only gets 49% among Black voters when you include third-party candidates. That should be very terrifying to Democrats.
Poll also suggests, again, and by the way, we're not citing this poll in a vacuum, which I think Matt said. It's so consistent now with 6 or 7 other polls that are going on pretty much simultaneously that the results have to be factored as if polling itself is not completely broken. And recent years have suggested that a lot of the mistakes that were made in the 2010s have been corrected. Black voters are on track to giving Trump twice the vote, the black vote, that any Republican has received since the beginning of the civil rights era, since 64. When, remember, there was a large contingent of black voters who voted Republican because liberal Republicans, particularly in the North, were anti-segregationists. And liberal Republicans were effectively Democrats who could not stay in the Democratic coalition because they were so horrified by the Democratic coalition's inclusion of segregationist voters and politicians and leaders in the South. And so there was a black vote for the Republican Party, a measurable black vote, because Republicans were standing up against Lester Maddox and George Wallace and Bull Connor and all these Southern racists who were Democrats. And so this is an entirely new thing. This is a 60-year tradition that would be broken. Republicans ordinarily getting 10 or 11% of the black vote, going up to 21 or 22%. And that, of course, is death. That really is, it's a small voting population.
May I make another observation about the poll, which I think is worth pointing out? That this is a great poll for Trump. Most polls these days are good for Trump for all the reasons we mentioned. It's not a very good poll for Republican Senate candidates. And the Senate candidates in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Arizona, in Nevada are all trailing narrowly in some cases, more distantly in others, the Democratic incumbents. What this says to me is this is an election that is really much about Biden. Yeah. And Biden is so unliked among the American people that people have just given up on this man. He is so bad at his job. He's just bad at presidenting, as our friend Ben Shapiro might say, that all of these voters who you would not expect to be Republicans are saying enough of him, enough of him. And that's why what Christine points out is so important, is that you give, okay, maybe a lot of these minority voters may not want to deal with Trump, but you give them the third option. It's like, please give me another option. I'm so desperate for Biden. That's not translating to the down ballot Democrats. And that's important. It's interesting
translating
too,
against the down ballot. The down ballot Democrats are doing just fine.
They're doing just fine. And what's interesting is, in the past two Trump elections, in 16 and 20, Republicans, the normie Republicans, tended to actually outpoll Trump. They ran ahead of Trump. In 2016, for example, Ron Johnson and Pat Toomey, they ran ahead of Trump, right? The Senate candidates. Yeah. Now, under the MAGA party, Republicans are doing worse than Trump. Trump is better than the people who pretend to be his epigonies. It's a weird element to our politics, and I think it's simply because Biden. It has nothing. It's very little to say about the Trumpification of the GOP. It has everything to say about how negatively people view Biden and the country over which he presides.
I just want to say something about the age issue. The question wasn't asked in the poll, which in itself I find curious. Why it wasn't listed as an issue, because there is a question where they say, is there one issue above all others that is determining your vote here, and age is not one of them.
Right. So after the 2020 election, Noah Rothman and I wrote the main analysis of the election results for commentary that came out in the December 2020 issue, and we described the election as a surgical strike on Trump because Senate candidates did well, even though Trump went and screwed up the Georgia recall votes and lost the Senate to the Democrats by openly working to depress Republican turnout in that second race at the beginning of January. But there was a 15-seat Republican pickup in the House, and they would have won the Senate under normal conditions. So who was nailed? Trump. Now we have Trumpy candidates running in 2022 and now in 2024 for the Senate, and it's not looking great for them, which really gives there are two different ways to interpret this, one of which is that Trump is a singular figure in American political history with rules that apply to him that don't apply to them, and that he polarizes in an astonishing way. And if he polarizes so much that he really does get Democrats to go out and crawl over broken glass to vote against him, there are enough of them to prevail and defeat him. But also that he is not a path forward, that this whole question of who's going to take over the party after he's gone, we now have 3 elections and a 4th coming that may well say it's okay on the margins if you're in a district that's a 65% Trump district or something like that, you'll win. You can be Marjorie Taylor Greene, you can be Matt Gaetz, you can be Lauren Boebert, although Boebert wasn't in such a district and she won by 500 votes last time. But these guys aren't going to win nationwide. They do. Trump has his own appeal, and it is not translatable. It's sort of, to use a literary analogy, it's like nobody could write Ulysses after James Joyce atomized the novel in writing Ulysses. There was no path along the. I mean, many people try.
Trump is more Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah,
more.
Yes,
babble,
well, Biden's now
stream
Finnegan's
of consciousness.
Yes, Biden's
right.
now Finnegan's Wake because he's incomprehensible and senile. Right, but I'm just saying, like, there's that there it's very pregnant about what happens after 2024, because you just can't look at the National Republican Party and say it has advanced itself and created a new set of electoral conditions that are going to change America, because every candidate who is in his image is probably less rather than more likely to prevail in these places that Trump stole from Democrats in 2016, right? In Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania has 2 Democratic senators. Wisconsin has 2 Democratic senators, right? Michigan has 2 Democratic senators. Nevada has 2 Democratic senators. Arizona has 2 Democratic senators. I mean,
Nevada is interesting though, because it has a Republican governor. It's the one governor's mansion that actually switched parties in 2022, and it is, I think, indicative of where a large number of Hispanic voters are moving. Right. But I want to pick up on what you're saying. I recall back in 2016, there was some event, and my mentor, Fred Barnes, commented that, look, in his Fred Barnes way, once Trump's off the stage, it'll just be the Republican Party again. Well, what we didn't anticipate was Trump would never leave the stage. So you can't have the reversion to the mean of the Republican Party for as long as Trump is now, headed toward the 3rd consecutive election in which he is the Republican nominee. However, it does make the Veep stakes all the more important. Yeah, because whoever Trump picks as Veep is immediately the front runner for the Republican nomination in 2028. And I just want to say that over the weekend, Trump held a rally in Wildwood, New Jersey. A lot of people showed up. A lot of argument, of course, about crowd size. Always has to happen with the Trump rally, but a lot of people were there, and the vistas were quite spectacular. Trump knows how to put on a show. And who introduced Trump?
Shlomi
Someone's favorite person.
My man, Doug Burgum.
Burgum is back, baby.
Eyebrows. And he looked fantastic. He introduced Trump. He spoke exactly like a running mate would. And I just have to say, I think there'd be a great unity in the Republican Party if Trump does end up selecting Governor Burgum as his running
Okay,
mate. And there you
Oh,
have
wait,
the
but
example.
this-
You have the example of the Republican Party front runner in 28 would be kind of, like a normie Republican guy who knows how to also speak MAGA.
Well, this week is really interesting, isn't it? Because the other name that I've heard floated is Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, another normie Republican who won by winning over those suburban, particularly female voters on issues like education. So, just a week or so ago, we had the puppy killer was like the front runner for, Kristi Noem and other kind of wackadoodle Marjorie Taylor Greene types. Maybe Trump's getting more serious and thinking about his
I have learned
prospects.
one thing in the Trump era, and that is Trump always disappoints.
This is
So,
No matter who, yeah, no
true
matter who you are,
observation.
right.
as excited as I am, I'm also prepared to be
Now,
disappointed.
I'm calling it. I'm calling it for Burgum. I never do this. I'm calling it for Burgum. That rally, that will be held up in Trump land and Trump world as the greatest moment of 2024 thus far. Therefore, Burgum's appearance at it will elevate him in Trump's eyes. And remember,
And he doesn't threaten Trump charisma wise. Sorry, Matt. I know
And
he has a particular, but he's not a threat in the same way some of those others are.
he's a billionaire. And you know what Trump likes? Rich people. He
also
rich,
needs
successful
money.
people.
He also
Well,
needs
he needs money. He needs money. But the point about Burgum, and Youngkin's a rich guy, but he's not as rich as he's not as rich as Burgum. And Burgum is a rich guy who flies under the radar as a rich guy. And let's face it, like, he doesn't want Pence, right? And Pence had a specific set of values to him in 26. He doesn't want Trump. He doesn't want Pence because Pence is too pure to do what needed to be done, and the when push came to shove. But Pence addressed the matter that he needed to address, right? Which was social conservatism. He needed to lock down the social conservatives by saying, "Look, I picked this guy. You're okay with me."
The Cruz voters,
Right. And he needs to lock down
the Haley voters.
And he's not going to pick Haley. And he shouldn't, by the way. I mean, politically, it would be malfeasance no matter what anybody says. And Burgum was the closest thing on that stage to being a Haley person who wasn't going directly at Trump. And if Youngkin had been on that stage, he would have probably been the same kind of thing. And unless there are massive skeletons in Burgum's closet, he is the perfect guy for him, because no one's going to bring a state, and Youngkin's not going to win Virginia for Trump. And Tim Scott, he doesn't need Tim Scott for South Carolina. And Rubio might be the best choice, but it is not executable for Rubio to be the nominee because of the residency problem, which was yelled at on Twitter by certain Republican professionals about how no, it doesn't really say in the Constitution that you have to be from the same state. The language is much more ambiguous. It's like, yeah, that's all Trump needs, is to be at the Supreme Court for another 6 months with an election controversy. Like, why would he summon that on himself? He will already win Florida. And yes, it would be good for him with Rubio, maybe with Hispanic voters. But remember, Hispanic voters are of many different hues and kinds. And so he doesn't need the Cubans. He has the Cubans.
And Rubio sometimes puts his foot in it. Can we recall? Like, he's actually, he's kind of a little more rogue compared to someone like Burgum.
And he's too big. He's too big a persona to be next
maybe.
to Trump.
And look, he would be, if they ever did, a vice presidential debate. And I know Rubio had the bad moment with Chris and everything. I mean, he would take Kamala Harris and he would put her, through the shredder. I mean, she could not even.
That would be fun to watch.
But no.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. I'm just saying, but I'm calling it for Burgum.
I want to say,
and then hopefully they'll put Burgum in charge of the logo.
Oh, he had a great logo.
You got to put Burgum in charge of the logo. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it just seems life is more fun when Doug Burgum is involved. That's all I'm saying. I mean, when he was powering through his injury,
I love this man
his leg
crush.
injury.
This is so much fun.
Well, no, and it's just true. And he looked to be having fun there on the stage at the rally. And one thing that's also important, I'm told, about Trump and when he makes these selections is does he have a relationship with the person? Does he like being around the person? And the reporting that's come out of Mar-a-Lago is that Trump actually enjoys being around Burgum and Burgum's wife. And they probably also speak a similar language in terms of wealth and kind of background. Burgum is not as diehard a social conservative as Pence was, but that only speaks to, again, what Trump needs at the moment. And we do know that Trump is always living in the particular moment and how to respond to that.
Trump doesn't need the crazy. Like, the classic thing is that the president is anodyne and he gets a running mate who's a little nuttier than
the attack dog,
who is the attack dog, or is more polarizing or something like that. So Trump is not, I mean, despite what everybody seems to, he's not senile and he's not stupid, and he knows who he is and what he's doing. And casting is one of the things that he's very proud of, is his casting. And Burgum looks like a presidential candidate in a movie. Like, if you were getting an extra to play a politician who is on the stage in like The Bodyguard, and you didn't want to, he's the president or the vice president, and you didn't want to make him a character, but he was just standing there while an assassin was about to shoot Whitney Houston, he would be the perfect person. He's got the gray temples, he's got the hair, all of that. And
by the way, so is Pence. I mean, Pence is
in his own way.
Yeah. I mean, he looked like a sort of an airline pilot. We both look like airline pilots.
Our friend Mark Halperin had a newsletter the other week where he, very helpfully for me anyway, outlined Trump's major liabilities headed into 2024. And they are in no particular order: abortion, the early vote, the Nikki vote, and the money deficit. And if you look at the potential Veep picks, it does seem like Burgum addresses the money deficit and the Nikki vote, and maybe the abortion issue a little bit, because he's not as identified as a hard-line social conservative.
Right.
The others, with Rubio, for example, leave aside the constitutional issues surrounding his appointment. Marco Rubio is very pro-life and has not changed his stance on that. It's a principled stance. I respect it. But it would not make Trump's abortion liability any better. And I think he'd be aware of that as well. It's also not clear that Rubio would get the Nikki vote all that much. It's Rubio's shifted much more in a economic nationalist direction since 2016. So, and then Rubio, I also want to bring along any independent wealth to help with the campaign.
And by the way, anybody who thinks that J.D. Vance is a serious candidate, let me just assure you that he's not, and here's why. So Cassius hath a lean and hungry look. Like, if you are Trump, I'm serious about this. Like, you have J.D. there completely changing his set of ideological convictions as he approaches his decision to, become a politician. Out of sheer naked raw ambition and not out of deep conviction and change, right? And if you're Trump and you have a 25th Amendment problem, or you have something like, again, animal cunning says, I don't want that guy anywhere. I don't want that guy anywhere near me. Like, could he get Brutus and, Casca and everybody to like surround me and stab me when the time comes? Oh yeah. So the first thing you got to do is make sure that it's not him. That's my, again, assuming as I do that Trump has a deep insight into the bad qualities of people, and that he exploits them when he can, and he uses, and he is wary of them when he is not. And every time in his career that he has misjudged, he has thought that somebody was loyal who was not loyal, he has paid the price. He's going to pay it this week in some fashion, with Michael Cohen testifying. Like, he thought he owned Michael Cohen lock, stock, and barrel, and then it turned out that Michael Cohen rational rather than an irrational person, and wasn't going to be wasn't going to be Karen McDougal and go to jail. Not Karen McDougal, Susan McDougal, and go to jail in ornery fashion to protect Bill Clinton. He's like, that's not necessary for him. Like, he doesn't need that threat of the hungry 40-year-old who is too eager to get to the presidency. So that's why I think JD Vance is and also he's going to win Ohio. So he doesn't need JD Vance for Ohio either. And all of these things, as you read the writing about this, the ability of people to simply assert their priors as though they are political realities, like, this is what America wants, is JD Vance. Yeah, I know. I know that it's what the Federalist wants, is JD Vance, but how many divisions does the Federalist have? Like, let's be honest. Anyway, the poll. Before I get to the poll, I guess I should tell you guys about our friends at Boll & Branch, because they are with us today again to talk about spring. Spring has sprung, the beauties of spring, and what you can do to get your bedding and everything comfortable as the warm summer months are coming. And what does that tell you? You want sheets that will keep you warm when you need them warm and keep you cool when you need to be cool. And Boll & Branch's signature sheets, so high quality, so comfortable, and so versatile that they can do both for you. They feel incredible on night one. They get softer with every single wash, made with the finest 100% organic cotton, completely free from toxins, buttery soft yet super breathable. So they're perfect for the warm months ahead, like I said. And it's not just sheets. Boll & Branch has the airiest blankets, most cloud-like duvets, fluffiest pillows, and so much more. 14 versatile colors in all sizes, from twin up to California king. Made without toxins. They offer that 30-night worry-free guarantee, which means sleep on them for 30 days. If you don't like them, you send them back. Free shipping and returns on all U.S. orders. So sleep better with the softest, most breathable bedding from Boll & Branch. Get 15% off your order when you use promo code commentary at bollandbranch.com. That's BOLLANDBRANCH.com, promo code commentary. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
And they also have the coveted Abe Greenwald endorsement.
They do, Abe. You are
not only do they have the Abe Greenwald endorsement, we got a letter from a listener who purchased Boll & Branch sheets because of us, also endorsing them.
Right. And also endorsing them are Abe's two dogs.
You bet.
Who are very, very happy.
They sleep quite soundly.
Yes. One small, one big. Adorable. Okay. Getting back to the poll, the ancient mariner hath returned, and I will now fix you with my glittering eye, O wedding guest, and ruin your life as I talk about Israel and Gaza and everything. So the poll, I also have. So I have this piece coming out, like Matt's piece on how bad Biden is at politics. I have a piece coming out in the June issue about the miscalculation that has been made by the Biden people on this obsession they have with the Michigan Arab vote and how it could cost him Michigan. I'm not going to go into detail. It's very detailed and number heavy, and actually the math checks out, which is amazing because, as you know, I often make incredibly stupid math mistakes when I'm talking, but I did actually go through the numbers and make sure that they were solid. But the New York Times poll today has two important pieces of data, one of which is that according to the poll, as Abe found in the crosstabs, the number of Americans who say that Israel, Gaza, Palestine is the number one issue to them in the upcoming election is 2%. And remember, we don't know how that 2% breaks out because it's the most important issue for me, and I'm not on the Israel's conducting genocide. Now, am I a representative voter? No. But is a Hamas supporter a representative voter? No. 80 to 20 Americans support Israel over Hamas. So I don't know how that breaks. That could break 50-50. There are many evangelical Christians for whom Israel is the number one issue. But the point is that it's not the number one issue for it's not the number one issue for Democrats or for young Democrats, because as we learned from the Harvard Institute of Politics poll, which every year does a very systematic survey of the attitudes of Americans between the ages of 18 and 29, Israel, Gaza, Palestine ranks as 15th on a list of 16 issues, with 2% saying that it is the number one issue. That's young voters, young people. Now, if you subsection that poll to 18 to 22 or college age populations, it goes up to like 13%. But 2% of Americans have this as their foremost issue. And in this poll, in the New York Times poll, there is this extremely bizarre passage.
Wait, John, I just want to tell you something.
Yeah. Okay.
According to the Times,
yes,
the 18 to 29-year-olds,
yes,
only 4% said that was their number one issue.
Okay, so they double it there. It was 2%. So they're friendlier to the idea that this is a very important issue than the Harvard IOP poll, which, by the way, only surveys 18 to 29-year-olds. So this is a poll of everybody. So they're just subsampling 18 to 29-year-olds. So you can presume that the Harvard IOP poll, simply in that universe alone, may be more accurate. But 2% or 4% is low, right?
Yes.
Okay. But now let me read this, because I had to parse this as I was reading it. Okay. The poll says that the problem for Biden comes with among people who had voted for him before, or among Democrats, is all based on the economy and their feelings about the economy and their economic uncertainty. Meaning that his pressure is actually coming from his right, relatively speaking. Like, people aren't like, you're great because you're redistributing income and using the government to spend money and help us and with student loans and whatever. Like, that is actually not how Democratic voters are responding, or people who would nominally be in Biden's camp are responding. But one exception, according to Nate Cohn and the authors of this poll, is Israel's war in Gaza, an issue on which most of Mr. Biden's challenge appears to come from his left. Now, here are the numbers. Around 13% of the voters who say they voted for Mr. Biden last time but do not plan to do so again said that his foreign policy or the war in Gaza was the most important issue to their vote. Just 17% of those voters reported sympathizing with Israel over the Palestinians. Okay, now you've got to take your bologna slicer and start slicing at these numbers. So 13% of those who voted for Biden in 2020 but are not planning to vote for Biden in 2024 said his foreign policy was the most important issue. That's not 13% of the Biden vote. That's 13% of a subsection of people who voted for Biden but now are not going to vote for Biden. Of those, about a fifth reported sympathizing with Israel over the Palestinians. So if you do the math there, the number of Biden voters who voted for him in 2020 but are not going to vote for him in 2024 because they sympathize with the Palestinians over Israel is then 10%. But again, it's not 10% of the people who voted for Biden, or what it is 10% of those who say they voted for Biden last time but will not vote for him again. How large a percentage is that of the overall electorate or of Biden's vote, and where are they physically in the country? 90% of people who say they aren't going to vote for Biden a second time say they're doing so for other reasons, meaning age, the economy, whatever. It's not Israel and Gaza. This is not an important electoral issue.
If you look at the actual question here, of when they ask registered voters in this poll, in the dispute between Israel and the Palestinians, which side do you sympathize with more, Israel or the Palestinians? Among registered voters, Israel 41%, Palestinians 22%. Something similar holds in every swing state, including Michigan. 37% for Israel, 19% for Palestinians.
And John, you called it right after October 7th. You said we were going to be the targets of a psyop that was going to try to transvalue what we believe and who were the victims of October 7th and whose side America should be on. And the psyop has been going on in America's college campuses, where we know that most of the people in these encampments aren't even enrolled at the schools where they're hiding out. Many of them are professional Antifa, left-wing, hate America anti-Semites who go from cause to cause in order to wreak maximum havoc on Western civilization. We know from Jonathan Schanzer's research that many of the student groups can be traced back to foundations which were the successors of earlier foundations closed because of connections to terrorism in the Middle East and pro-Hamas organizations.
The Holy Land Foundation.
Primarily the
Texas?
Holy Land Foundation, right? And then, of course, we had the photograph of Samiel Arian's wife at Columbia, right?
Samiel Arian pled guilty to fundraising for Hamas.
He's
pled
terrible.
guilty and was deported from the United States.
And now they show up at Columbia. And then we also have the evidence of the past weekend where of the commencements that were disrupted by pro-Hamas protesters, when you see the photos of how many people were responsible for the disruption, minuscule number. They're not many people. They're small in number. And yet the PSYOP is inflating their importance in order to delegitimize Israel and intimidate the pro-Israel community.
And the Biden people have fallen for. Go ahead.
Yes.
I just want to bring up one more point about the poll here on this. So on the question, regardless of how you might vote, tell me whether you trust Joe Biden or Donald Trump to do a better job on each of the following: the economy, abortion, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 35% Joe Biden, 50% Donald Trump.
And what did Trump say this weekend at Wildwood? He said
this is important. A very strong statement supporting
Israel's got to win this war. I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, he said. Is it okay that I said it? They got to.
I don't care.
Sometimes you got to go for right over wrong.
And
he said he was going to deport the student protesters too.
Yeah, which I'm totally on board with.
I mean, like, what is he trying to do? Like, he is mainlining heroin into my veins.
There's another data point here too, though. Like, can we also add that the weird news story about the Biden administration supposedly suggesting and holding out as some sort of carrot to Israel that they'll let them know where the Hamas leadership is if they decide not to go into Rafah? This story really, really bothered me. This idea that we know where Hamas's leadership is hiding and we're not sharing it with one of our most important allies because we're using it as a carrot or stick to get them not to use large bombs. I mean, this is not.
And if we know where Sinawar is, we would know where the hostages are too.
Anyway,
they're surrounding him.
Anyway, the whole thing is demented because we don't know where Sinwar is. Where do we get intelligence on Hamas? From Israel. They don't know where Sinwar is.
But they might know where
maybe they've asked Robert Malley.
Oh, well, that's true. That could be.
They just had to hack his phone.
Yeah, listen, we'll give you back your security clearance if you tell us where Sinwar is. I mean, I think that's a funny possibility. But we got to talk about the effect of the PSYOP or the madness of the Biden administration this weekend, because after last week's outrage in the withholding of, the partial arms embargo against his own arms package, this report came out saying there's no evidence that Israel has conducted war crimes in Gaza, but it feels like it. I don't know. Maybe a little.
Well, war crimes are a vibe now, right? I guess it's a vibe.
Yeah, it's like a vibe. Yeah, it's like
Seth called this.
I know. I just feel like They did it. But I'm not saying, and Anthony Blinken, our Secretary of State, who is not covering himself in glory as a figure in Jewish history, shall we say, and will be ill remembered in the annals of Jewish history should he go on like this, went on Face the Nation and basically said, look, I can't say that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, but, you know, I mean, I don't have the quote right in front of me. You know, they went too far. It's just, okay. So basically he said, I want to leave the impression that Israel, we understand that Israel committed war crimes in Gaza. Israel is an international war criminal. And then 10 hours later, he issued a statement after a meeting in some fashion or other with Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, and said, America reaffirmed its rock-solid support for Israel in its cause and in fighting Hamas and all of that. So in Blinken's blinkered logic, we are now four square standing firmly behind with all of our American might an international war criminal. That's his calculation, not mine. The thing that follows what he said on Face the Nation is, and we're withholding the aid because Israel is a war criminal. Then because Democratic politicians all over America are having a cow over what Biden's announcement is doing, and their phones are ringing. And we're talking about Democrats in Maryland who have to deal with the fact that they have a senator who is basically a Hamas representative in the Senate. We have Josh Shapiro who are very worried about their fundraising and about the Jewish vote in Maryland, which is small but potent, and the governor of Pennsylvania, where there is a significant Jewish vote and who is himself a Sabbath-keeping Jew, and Jackie Rosen, the senatorial Democratic senator from Nevada, who is herself, though we're saying that, you know, the Trumpy candidate isn't doing so great, she herself is clearly very worried about November and is complaining to Chuck Schumer and everybody about this thing that has been done to her to make her life more difficult. So now they're trying to walk back their walk forward of their walk back of we're embargoing the arms because we think that there's a possible civilian crisis in Rafah too. They probably committed war crimes, but the evidence wasn't established firmly enough. Meanwhile, Israel has now evacuated 360,000 Palestinians from Rafah in 4 days. And this is my other favorite thing. The roads are crowded. International aid organizations report that the journey out of Rafah features traffic. Because, it is an international war crime for there to be traffic when you're leaving the Taylor Swift concert where there were 75,000 people. Like, it's hard. If a lot of people want to go someplace on the 4th of July weekend all at once, there's that's not a war crime.
Have you noticed this too about all the photos from Rafah lately? It's women, elderly, and small children. All the military-age males they're not visible, which says something, I think, about
I thought all the women and children
happening.
had been killed, Matt. I thought they were all dead. So I don't really understand now. I learned.
I just want to go back to the Biden, because as you were painting this picture of what happened over the weekend, I was recalling the scenes at the beginning of Peter Jackson's film of The Two Towers, where King Theoden is under the spell of Saruman, and he's leaning on the advisor Wormtongue, and Wormtongue is basically controlling the foreign policy of the Rohirrim. And Biden is no Theoden, I'm just going to say that, but he is in a somewhat decrepit state. And if you read Peter Baker's TikTok over the weekend of how Biden turned against Israel, it's clear that a lot of the pressure is coming from Blinken and coming from a director at the NSC named John Feiner, And it seemed that Baker wasn't clear. As always, Jake Sullivan is a very savvy bureaucratic operator, but Sullivan has drifted toward their more tough on Israel position. And I just had this view that Biden, has been moved by these characters in his administration to adopt an incoherent and harmful policy toward Israel. And I think that deserves a hearing. I mean, who's Gandalf in this analogy? Who's going to come in and shake Biden from his spell? Who?
John Fetterman.
You're right.
Looks like Gandalf.
Right, exactly. Yes.
all that has to happen is for his hair and his beard to go gray, right? That's all we need.
Ditch the shorts for a lovely robe.
No, Gandalf wears like a weird robe.
Exactly.
Yeah, but he doesn't wear shorts. There are no. I do not.
Okay.
I do not see Gandalf's calves anywhere in that universe. So.
Okay, that's totally fair. But I'm awash in wonder, because looking at these polls and the crosstabs, and you do the internal math and everything like that, and their freak out has a different cause. I don't want to blow the surprise of my piece. It's like the twist ending of the piece that you will be able to read tomorrow. So I'm not going to do it. I will just say that there is a psychological interest in the Biden camp in locating their main political problem that they need to address in the Israel-Gaza-Palestine crisis. And I will explain why in the article, but I'm just saying it's so counterintuitive. And it's counterintuitive because America supports Israel and does not support Hamas. If you call the problem a problem of Israel versus the Palestinians, obviously the numbers look better, right? The poll says 42 to 22. That's still a 2-to-1 margin. You know what a 2-to-1 margin is in politics? You go with the 2, not the 1. You go with the 2. Like particularly, by the way, if the 2 is supported not only by evangelical Christians or whatever, but by a significant number of people who are part of what used to be understood as your base, even though they make up a small percentage of the population, and a wildly disproportionate source of your money, by the way, because Jews give, both in charity and in political donations, are wildly disproportionately involved in both. And so you kind of don't go at them like this. It doesn't make sense, particularly if the polling says the side you're supporting is only supported by 20% of the country. Am I taking crazy pills? I'm not, because there's a reason. There's a reason that Biden and his people want to believe that this is a huge problem for them, and I explain it. And I'm keeping that. I'm keeping that for a spoiler. So
you have to subscribe.
You have to subscribe, or you could read it tomorrow. We put it online. Now, Matt, speaking of that and some other things, you have we have a double recommends. Very exciting.
Yes, John, I've been reading a history of World War I, so that's put me in mind of the dual monarchy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so today I'll be issuing a dual recommendation here on Commentary Podcast. A lot happening in the world, and so I wanted to point our listeners to two audiovisual products that they can enjoy. The first is our dear friend Dan Senor's Call Me Back podcast, where he has a huge get, as we say in the biz. He interviews Prime Minister Netanyahu on the eve of Memorial Day in Israel and Independence Day in Israel coming up, about the state of the war, state of Israel, future plans. It is, of course, a must listen. My other recommendation is available on YouTube. Jerry Seinfeld gave the commencement address at Duke University. It's about a 17-minute long speech. If you don't want to watch it, of course, you should watch it. But if you don't want to watch it, our friends at the Free Press also have a transcript available of the Seinfeld commencement at Duke. It's funny. It has some good life advice. But more important than the content, and the content's always worth it, is what Seinfeld has bizarrely come to signify in our new world, in our post October 7th world, because Seinfeld is one of America's most famous Jews, and because he has personal ties and is himself a Zionist, he has become the target of the pro-Hamas forces in the United States for his support for the state of Israel. Now, this is the comedian who is entirely about manners in our society. It's what he has based his 50-year career of stand-up comedy on. He does not talk about politics, never has. But since October 7th, he has made it clear that he supports Israel as a Zionist and as an American Jew. And he has become targeted, and he was targeted while delivering the speech. As the New York Times put it, dozens of students walked up and left in protest of Seinfeld's commencement. And that's like MAGA math and crowd size.
Yeah.
When you say dozens, it's like, there were 1 million people at the Wildwood rally over the weekend to cheer on Trump. If you count and there's a panoramic view, a wide shot of the commencement as Seinfeld was taking the lectern. There were maybe like 24 people, like literally dozens. They looked up, how many people can we get away with dozens? The majority of people, again, were there. They enjoyed the speech, as you will enjoy the speech. And so that's my second recommendation of the day.
Can I quickly add a third, just because it's connected to this? Because Jerry Seinfeld released a movie on Friday on Netflix. It's called Unfrosted, and it was viciously attacked by critics. Richard Roper, Variety, other places, saying it's unfunny and terrible, and Seinfeld should hang it up, and this is ridiculous. And so very grudgingly, I watched it on Friday night, I think, because I was like, well, I know it's going to be bad. And it isn't. It is intermittently hilarious. And what's interesting about it is it's an extraordinarily silly, highly arch movie in which the war between Post and Kellogg over introducing a toaster pastry is portrayed as the space race. And Kellogg is America and Post is Russia. And Amy Schumer is basically Khrushchev, and Jerry Seinfeld is Kennedy, and Kennedy is in the movie, played by Bill Burr in one of the most hilarious 3-minute performances I've ever seen. It's incredibly silly. There is nothing remotely political about it until there's a sort of January 6th joke toward the end. I can understand that people might not get the humor or find it a little overly stagey or like false or something.
That was the thing with late Seinfeld. The late seasons of Seinfeld, too, also had this kind of absurdist quality that's more Jerry than his writing partner, like Larry David.
Right, because Larry had left the show. Right. Anyway, I thought it was delightful. It hit my total sweet spot as a 63-year-old person because it is designed, everything makes reference to mid-1960s television commercials and things like that. And it looks like it is filmed to look like kind of like a Doris Day Rock Hudson comedy. It's got that sort of overbright Look magazine photo spreads of Populux America when corporate headquarters were all wildly elaborately designed and all of that. And I loved it. And I am struck by the hostility to it in the reviewing, because you could just say, well, it doesn't work, or it's too stupid, or he doesn't hit the landing, or I just didn't find it funny. That is not the tone. The tone is, he's horrible, and this is a terrible thing that he's done to America. And I can only look at that as part of a political attack. That it's that he's come out as this very fervent, like he went to Israel. He sat with Rachel Goldberg Poland and John Poland, the parents of the American Israeli hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland, the kid whose part of whose arm was blown off. He and his wife toured. Her Instagram feed is October 7th, 95% of the time. This is a very fervent commitment. He's been very politically circumspect his entire career because he wants to appeal to the largest number of people. He's not interested in alienating anybody. And he's that. And then there's also the thing about he's the guy who started blowing the whistle 10 years ago saying, I'm not going to perform on college campuses anymore because
the cancellation
don't know how to. No, also, they don't know how to laugh.
Right.
Because they're afraid if they laugh at a joke, somebody is going to criticize them for laughing at something that isn't woke enough. And so he and Chris Rock, two of the 3 or 4 greatest comedians of our time, say, I'm not performing before comedy audiences, young comedy audiences, because they have lost the thread. And that attack also
he talks about that in the commencement.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so it's worth watching.
Very worth watching. And
Unfrosted.
Unfrosted on Netflix, the Jerry Seinfeld commencement speech, available at the Free Beacon in text and on YouTube in
Free Press
video. Free Press. I'm sorry, the Free Press.
Yes.
And what's
Dan Senor
Dan
talking
Senor's
to BB.
Call Me Back with BB, which will remind you when you spent your last 10 years hearing nothing about how horrible Bibi Netanyahu is, how transfixing a presence he can be. If you listen to the podcast, you were listening to one of the most intelligent political figures who has ever lived, and I don't say that lightly. Like, there is a command quality to his ability to articulate the positions that he is holding that will make you weep for our presidency, if for no other reason that no one can say what America is about anymore, for example. Anyway, thank you, Matt, for you, for Christine.
Oh, and we have a special treat after.
Oh, a special treat, yes. Can you please introduce, be your DJ, introduce the song?
Oh, well, thank you. This is an honor. Our contributing editor, Eli Lake, has been having some fun with artificial intelligence. You know, that is all the rage these days. And in particular, Eli's developed a specialty in generative AI music. And so he spent some time working the computers, and he has produced a commentary theme song, not our podcast theme song, but a new theme song. It kind of has a disco soul flair to it.
Sort of suits us, actually.
Yes, the lyrics are hilarious, and I believe that thanks to Abe's technical wizardry, we're going to be able to append the track after you sign off, John. And so this is Eli Lake's new commentary theme song,
which I believe is called "It's Worse Than That."
It's worse than that. Yes,
worse than that. Yes. So, Abe, hit it.
The shoplifters in the store don't know how to win a war. Double standard Democrats, but actually it's worse than that. Hunter Biden is a liar. Amazon banned Abby Schreier. The squad is coming, that's a fact. But actually it's worse than that. When the whole world is losing its mind, a magazine is holding the line. A remnant of the way it used to be. Commentaries keeping us free. The union kept the schools online. The government is far too kind to evil-doing bureaucrats. But actually it's worse than that. And the marijuana everywhere, screaming freaks with purple hair. Liberals up to spending tax, but actually it's worse than that. When communists take over the quad, vandalize the synagogues. A magazine that says no more, commentaries keep it sky.
We're headed for a crash. We all close to first. You can hope for the best, but you must expect the worst.
Catabites at foggy bottom, little punks like Johnny Rotten. You need to get off BB's back, but actually it's worse than that. Colleges are DEI, left is at the FBI. The media is full of hacks, but actually it's worse